We see you as you sit behind the wheel of your truck. We see you shake out the nerves before you pick up your hammer, your scissors, your pots and pans. As you find new ways to keep the lights on and put the pieces back together, we see you. As you straighten the rows, keep your customers safe, and crunch the numbers, we see you. As you head back to work, we see you. You've got this. We're open to help you reopen. Visit bbb.org.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Trust in Trying Times webinar. I'm your host, Dale Dixon. So good to have you with us. This is a webinar that we hold on a weekly basis. We run this webinar live for BBB accredited businesses. Those are businesses that have taken an oath to uphold BBB's standards for trust, to be responsive, to act with integrity, to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. That's your business. Thank you very much. We also record these webinars and post them so that you can watch them later on, share them with other businesses, share them with employees when it's helpful. It's definitely there in our YouTube channel, and we'll be getting those links up for you in the chat section of this webinar. Today, we are tackling this topic of finding and retaining talent in the times of COVID and the difficulties of COVID-19. We've got a great guest who's going to step us through some very tactical items that we can put into practice in our businesses immediately coming up. Now, a quick bit of housekeeping. We have an opportunity for Q&A during the live version of this webinar, and we would invite you to ask questions. If you look at the bottom of your Zoom window, you're going to see a Q&A box, Q&A. Use that to ask questions. Also, while you're there, be reading the other questions, and you can upvote. So look for a little thumbs up symbol. We're going to answer those that get the most upvotes first, as we are working with limited time today. So let's get into the introduction of our guest. Chris-Ann Hatch is the Director of Workplace Innovation. Chris-Ann has been with ArchBright for more than 6 years, working with companies to strategize, innovate, and implement HR solutions, deliver employee development training, and provide advice, consultation, and support on a wide range of HR issues. And we're so grateful that Chris-Ann is able to join us from ArchBright. Chris-Ann, with that, the floor is yours.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dale. I'm going to share my screen now, so give me the thumbs up when you can see it.
And it is almost there. We're looking at your presenter view right now.
All righty.
I'll tell the folks at home as you work on that, we practiced this several times. So it's the technology, and we're always ready for something to just change when we're not expecting it to change, just like that. So I see Chris-Ann, there's the screen that we want to see.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dale. Sorry about that. Hello, everybody, and happy Thursday. Thank you so much for having me. Glad to be here with you all. A little bit about ArchBright. I'm only doing this because as I go through the presentation, I'm going to share several examples of the things we've done as a company that relate to what I'm going to talk about today. ArchBright is basically an HR and safety workers' compensation consulting firm. So think of us like a professional service organization. We're based out of Seattle, but we operate in Washington, Oregon, and Idaho, have an office in Spokane, and we've got about 100 employees. So just kind of keep that in mind as I'm sharing some of the stories and examples of some of the things we've done to attract and retain employees, because I think it's going to be relevant for many of you on the call as well. So while the stats in regards to these issues that we're going to talk about, let me know when it's advancing. Did it advance for you there?
We're seeing the next slide.
It wasn't advancing for me, thank you. So while the stats in some regards that you see up there on the screen are a little bit depressing, high unemployment rates, businesses closing at an alarming rate, skepticism on the part of the American public, there is a silver lining in all of this, particularly when you're looking for employees. If you do some math, it basically means there should be about 10 million workers out there looking for new jobs. Now, I know this isn't a perfect science because there's reasons that people aren't looking, really good unemployment benefits, childcare problems, people unable to work because they have young children at home, things of that nature. But the fact of the matter is there are really good candidates available. So in the next 15, 20 minutes or so, I'm really going to cover two basic topics with you all that both relate to helping you attract and retain good people during COVID and after COVID. One is, I'm just going to touch briefly because it's a big issue, but people don't necessarily think about it when they think about attracting and retaining, and that's leadership's response during times of crisis. And then the more obvious, I'm going to get into some strategies that you can think about for attracting and retaining talent. So let's talk first about how leadership in your organization is responding. People are stressed out and feeling a loss of control right now. And the question is, as an employer, are you helping or are you making matters worse? It's really critical to how a leadership team and an organization responds right now to whether or not they're going to keep good people and whether they can attract good people through their reputation. I'm going to use the word reputation a couple times. Reputational management should be something on your mind. I'm not going to get into that at any length, but if you want to talk to me about it at some point, I'm welcome to have that conversation as well. So you see some things on the screen here as I kind of click through. You should be communicating effectively, often, and with transparency. So what does that mean? So some tips for you. Consider the tone and the language in your written communications. Is it positive? Is it clear? Have someone read it. A marketing individual would be good, maybe someone in HR, but is it effective communication, or are you sending a message you didn't really intend to send? Whenever possible, use video as your means of communicating to your employees. Let me give you an example. Archbrite CEO Shannon Kavanaugh puts out a regular CEO address, speaking to how we're handling the crisis as a company, how we're performing financially, critical projects we're working on, member issues, etc., whatever's relevant to the employees. And remember, I said at the beginning, people are stressed out and feeling a loss of control. This helps. Every little bit of this type of communication helps. Also use video as much as possible during your meetings so employees can actually see each other. Start meetings with a few moments of connection. We're all needing that with our loss of social interaction right now. And in general, what are you doing? All of these things combined in creating a sense of community. Your employees want to be part of something. They want to know what's going on. Help them feel a part of so they're not feeling less than. The next one is, what are you doing to teach your leadership team on managing people? And specifically as it relates to this leadership during times of crisis is being empathetic, compassionate, and tactful. And I know that can be hard sometimes. The good news is, as I love to say, I train and teach on a lot of these topics that are within this presentation. And I often say, empathy, compassion, and tactfulness is like math. It can be taught, it can be learned. And so there's a lot of really great resources out there for how to be more empathetic, compassionate, etc. as a manager if you're leading people, particularly in these times of crisis. Another big issue is, how are you managing through change? We thought we knew change before COVID, right? Holy crap, we had no idea. The rate of change in many organizations is astronomical as we've pivoted, adjusted, modified, etc. Therefore, make sure your organization is effective in implementing change. And there's 3 things specifically that you can do. Describe what is changing and why. Adults need that information. Seek employees' reaction to that change. So gather feedback, get their input, and regain a sense of control and help others to regain a sense of control by identifying what they have control over. We teach an entire change management class, but those are 3 key issues that we get into in detail when we're talking about change. And then lastly, leadership has to act decisively And then back to communicating effectively, communicate that decision, whatever decisions are being made, articulately, decisively, quickly, and with as much transparency as possible again. So let's shift now to discussing some of the strategies that you might want to consider in helping to retain employees and attract employees. And I know as I go through this list, some of it you might be going, well, what does that have to do with attracting an employee? For example, like this first one on the list that says, understand employees' rights. Well, quite frankly, it has a lot to do because, again, it speaks back to the reputational management I was talking about. Companies that care for their employees, educate them on their rights and what is available to them, and are transparent about these issues, have higher engagement and therefore higher retention with their employees. So make sure you know the laws, you know the regulations, they're coming out fast and furious. What avenues do you have to get that information? One, but make sure you're sharing it with their employees. Let me give you an example. The emergency family medical leave that was initiated back in, I think, the end of March, early April. I know a lot of companies, I think, take the approach they're just going to let their employees try to find out about it and ask about it. Archbright took a different approach. They were proactive. They met with every single employee that had school-aged children to inform them of their rights, let them know what their options were available, let them think through it, speak with their manager, what's going to work, allowing us to take advantage of those rights. And let me tell you, as someone with school-aged children at home, that matters to me. And it matters to me that my employer cared enough to take that step to inform me of my rights. So whether it be unemployment benefits, emergency leave, sick and safe leave, whatever it might be, I encourage you to be proactive with that and share that with your employees. Next up is compensation options. If you are able to, consider any strategies and modifications that you can make to compensation that could enhance both your marketability for candidates, but also as an employer internally with your existing workforce. So some ideas with regards to compensation are incentives. Sign-on bonuses are very attractive to candidates, particularly when they're looking at two different potential employers and one offers it and one doesn't. Premium pay for extended hours or hazardous work, and maybe considering temporary or permanent pay increases to base pay for high demand roles or roles that are very difficult to fill. So those are just a few examples of some things to consider with regards to compensation and pay. Next on the list is work alternatives. Instead of relying solely on recruiting, if you're finding gaps in your workforce, what about your already available workforce? Can you offer project work? Archbright shifted to project work in a huge way when COVID hit and everybody was closed, for example. And so far we've been able to make it through this crisis without laying anybody off. And so we shifted and we've gotten some really significant project work done. Is that something you could offer to your employees? Maybe flexible work hours. We have one employee in particular that comes to mind where she has very young children at home. So during the day was difficult. Both she and her husband are working at home. So he works during the day. She now works from 5 to midnight. We often get emails from her at 11:30, 12 o'clock at night because that's when she's doing the bulk of her work shift. So being flexible with your employees with that. Remote work. Well, many organizations prior to COVID would have had certain positions they said never could be done remotely. Boy, that tune changes rapidly when it becomes the only option, doesn't it? So could remote work be something you could consider in maybe greater capacity than you have? Could you reallocate employees and or responsibilities? And then always an option, could you retrain or cross-train employees to cover other gap areas? Many organizations have done that as well as an option. Next, recruiting. This is a big one. We could do an 8-hour webinar on recruiting strategies alone. So I'll just try to hit on some highlights of some of the things you should or could maybe be thinking about as it relates to recruiting. So one of the big ones is, and I know this could be tough for a lot of employees, but again, pre-COVID, we might have said we couldn't do it. And now, again, I think that tune has changed. You got to consider, if you haven't already, going completely virtual in your recruiting strategies, from where and how you post your positions, to interviewing, to hiring, and even onboarding of your employees. Sadly, in a recent poll, only 16% of HR professionals indicated they were in a position to be able to do so. That's difficult. So think about your company. Just a quick note, if you Google digital interviewing platforms, you'll get several really good options that you could consider for your virtual hiring, interviewing, onboarding. Along the same lines, are you spreading the word on social media, etc.? I loved the video that was shown at the beginning about We Are Open, because that's one of the points I was going to make in the webinar today is, what are you doing to make sure people know you are open and that you're hiring? So, of course, social media is a great way to do that. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn at a minimum. But also, are you using sites like, if you're in the healthcare industry, Doximity, Reddit, Meetup, even care.com allows you to post. So think outside the box with regards to social media and where you can post. Also, create posts that your employees can share on their own personal social media. For example, every time we have an opening at ArchBright, we all receive an email notifying us of the opening, as well as automatic links that we can use on Facebook and LinkedIn to share that post, pointing people back to our website to apply for the position. I would be willing to bet 75% plus of the employees we hire come through referrals, word of mouth, that type of social media interaction. Again, like I said, if you make it known you're open and hiring, the available candidate pool will gravitate towards those organizations that are active with their recruitment outreach. So a video like Better Business Bureau has, you know, what are you doing with regards to making sure people know you are open for business and that you're hiring? Create a detailed procedure and share with all hiring managers, considering system issues and technologies. That's another big nugget. But what are you doing for documenting that process and making sure your hiring managers know what it is, that it's out there, and that it's being followed? Utilize your existing pool of candidates. Go back to that pool of resumes that you have in that file. You'd be surprised how many might be looking again. And the last one I'm going to say is stay connected to talent. Think about an alumni association with a university. An employer should do things like that too. Maintain a relationship with talent that you either weren't able to hire before, maybe talent that left and that you'd love to have come back. Maintaining those relationships, whether through email, LinkedIn, all the sites that I mentioned like Meetup or Reddit or other online social networking options, is a great way to maintain a really good talent pool that you can draw from. The next slide I'm going to show you is kind of another interesting one that you might think, well, what does this have to do with attracting and retaining? I'm going to encourage you to think about your attendance policies. I'm going to share a couple strategies, and these might all have a little more to do with retention, but again, reputation management, word does get out through Glassdoor, for example, and other sites where current and past employees can rate your performance as an employer. So are you thinking about things like maybe a PTO donation policy during these times when employees are stressed out? They may need a little time off to figure out how they're going to handle child care, things of that nature. Again, being proactive with your employees and helping them out are all ways that you can lessen stress. They appreciate it. They'll stay with you. What about, again, knowing your employees' rights and communicating them relative to attendance-related issues and any laws and regulations around that? And then maybe offering opportunities for negative balances in sick and PTO banks might be something that your organization could consider for your employees. Next up is employee recognition. What are you doing right now to recognize the efforts and the wins and all the good work that is continuing to happen? At ArchBright, for example, we have a recognition program that allows anyone to recognize anyone at any time. We ask that they have a specific issue or incident so that that recognition is very specific, that it details the positive impact that whatever happened had on the individual or individuals. And then we also tie it into one of 6 values that we have and is a very common language that we use at ArchBright. Employee recognition is absolutely key to employee retention. So what are you doing relative to recognition? And then the last strategy I'm going to share with you, and then we'll open it up for questions, is what are you doing? This kind of ties in a little bit with what I said earlier about managing change. But what are you doing to engage your employees in improving your business operations? So many great ideas come from the employee base. So what are you doing to engage with your employees on how you can improve your business operations, how you can pivot, change, whatever it might be during COVID, which will likely continue after COVID, things of that nature. So asking for their opinion, sharing information, being open and transparent. All of those things will contribute to retaining and attracting really good talent. So in summary, as an organization, you really need to take a good hard look at what you're currently doing or not doing, if that may be the case. That's creating a work environment that people want to be a part of and that differentiates you from your competitors. Thank you. I'll open it up to questions.
Sam, thank you so much. So we've got a couple questions that are starting to come in. First of all, is there an average spend or a budget formula that should be applied to job postings?
Ooh, I don't know of one. If there is, and I got to tell you, there's so many free options out there now. You know, we spend very little at ArchBright on our postings because I would say we do, as I mentioned, we get the vast majority from LinkedIn and our social media. And so we spend very little on our postings anymore. But I think that's really an individual issue based on need. You know, it depends too on the demand for the role, the pay for the position, how easy or difficult is it to find people with that, whatever expertise and qualifications you're needing for that role. You know, I can think of some examples. We do have a position right now, software developer, that we are struggling. And so, you know, we may have to pay a little bit to post in some different sites for that one. So probably largely an individual. I don't know of a magic number though.
Okay. But what I'm hearing you say is word of mouth, utilizing the networks of your existing employees via social media is a great place to be.
And
so in that vein,
cost effective.
Yeah, and cost effective. In that vein, as you're writing that job description and the job posting specifically, are there some tips, best things that should be included, should not be included in the job posting to make it, to help identify and attract the right people?
So, you know, it's a balancing act between it is a bit of a sales aspect. You are trying to attract people to that position and that posting, while at the same time being very full disclosure and truthful. And so you've got to balance those two at all times. But certainly some key issues are, you know, what are some real differentiators of your company? So you want to start with kind of a, you know, here's what's great about my company ABC, that you'll want, the reason you want to come work here. Don't waste a lot of time and space on all of on the job description. You can point them to the job description, right? So in the ad for the post, for example, you can always point them to where they can read the full job description if they want to do that and apply for the position. Use that space really, again, to highlight the aspects of that job. What's going to be critical? Does it manage people? Does it not? What are the real key aspects of that job? You know, pay is always an interesting one. Do you put it in? Do you not? Personally, I'm a fan of at least putting in a range if you can, because some jobs it's tricky, and what you don't want to do is attract people that are either so highly overqualified or underqualified and wasting their time and yours. So I personally feel like if you can put a range in, that's really helpful. And then benefits, any benefits that differentiate you, again, you'll want to highlight those as well.
Bridget wrote in, how would you handle recruiting when we're currently slow, but work comes in spurts? Therefore, we want to have the group of employees ready to send out when the work comes in that keeps us competitive in our market. Do you have any suggestions?
So that goes back again to full disclosure. And, you know, one of the things that I can't remember if I mentioned it, but temporary postings, on-call postings. When COVID happened, my husband was laid off and he applied for 50 jobs. And he was willing to do a lot of different things, and he's still doing some of them, even though he went back to work. He did the Instacart shopper. He's got another very, very, very part-time job. So just be very clear, you know, make it clear, we'd like to bring you on now. However, it is based on demand. So it's either on call, it's temporary, you know, those types of things. I think a lot of people are being very open-minded and willing to consider those things. Particularly, we know how it works. If you get the foot in the door and you're a really good employee, you're going to consider that person to keep on, right? So just be really clear in your postings. And there's nothing wrong with hiring someone without putting them to work right away. Also, just make sure that's very, very clear.
Okay. That covers our questions for today. Chris Ann Hatch, thank you so much. ArchBright is the company. We really appreciate your time. This has been a huge help, and I will recommend that our viewers take a look at the link that is in the chat box for all of the webinars. This webinar will be posted at that YouTube channel in the playlist for webinars later on this afternoon, and you can go back and watch it if you weren't able to take notes, or if you had some other things going on, as we sometimes do during these webinars. We really appreciate it. But all of those links are in the chat box. A big thank you to Jason and Jamie, who are part of the BBB team working in the background on this. We will have another webinar coming up next Thursday. Be sure and watch for the registration links on that as well. Kristen, any final words from you?
No, I don't think so. You know, other than I did put up my contact information. If anybody wants any clarification, I am always happy to reach out, respond, have a conversation, whatever the case may be. So don't hesitate to reach out to me if you're interested or want more information.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
And that is also in the chat box. Grab your cursor, move over there, and highlight and copy that if you want to capture that before it goes away as we wrap up this webinar, this edition of Building Trust in Trying Times from Better Business Bureau. Have a fantastic day.